was just
yeah.
thinking our leaves are starting to change here. And I realized that we left New Zealand when the leaves were starting to change there. So, and that's how long
Oh,
we've been in lockdown. So it's like,
no. And you have such beautiful fall. Yeah, yeah. I know we call it autumn and you call it fall, but it's just the colours that you have on your trees is just. I just love it. I love it. I love it when people share the pictures of the. Yeah, I just. We don't have, we have some colours but not as many, because our gum trees are just
yeah.
not, they just, they don't do colour very well at all.
They don't do autumn, right? Yeah.
I don't I don't know what the plan was for gum trees, but I love the smell of the eucalypts, and they do have pretty, we do have pretty, you know, there's flowering gums and all different colours, but yeah, we don't have the beautiful leaves, the yellows and the reds and the russet, and of course New Zealand is just such a beautiful country, isn't it? I know why you know, I can understand why you have such a strong bond there. Yeah. And you know, living there when you're young, it just gives you a bond forever.
And
Which
I
is
think,
why I love going back to Missouri, but
fair
it's,
enough. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I think having kids there too. You know, there's
And
something about
you
where
have,
you have your children that
yeah,
you feel anchored to, you know?
you you have a permanent connection. I mean, yeah, having children there, I mean, you've grown something there. I mean,
Exactly.
it's a lovely, yeah, yeah, it's definitely a very important part of your life and your children's lives. And New Zealand is a beautiful, like of all the countries in the world, it's hard to beat.
That's true.
Um, yeah,
Because you've got
it's,
everything in one country, right? It's just
yeah, yeah, you do. And, you know, they do it well. Um, I think we've got an election coming up, but I think
I think they're going to do that well too, actually. So
they're going to do that well. I love their, like, the Prime Minister, I love her directness, and she acts, you know, she doesn't sit on the fence.
no, no, she doesn't. Yes. On that note, I think it's about time for us to kick off, June. It's great
Okay.
chatting with you. But let us dive into our topic for today, and I'm going to start off introducing myself, and then we'll move into your introductions. I am Cynthia Bulik. I am the lead principal investigator of the Eating Disorders Genetics Initiative, and I am right now at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the States. And I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Dr. June Alexander. We've been talking about having her on an EDGI talk for I don't know how long, and we dragged her out of bed this morning with the sun in Australia. So June, welcome to our EDGI talk.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, so I need to explain a little where I am. I am in southeastern corner of Australia in Victoria, and I am someone who has experience of anorexia nervosa from age 11, and I took 44 years to regain my sense of healthy self. And since then, which is almost 15 years ago now, I have had an amazing sort of carpet ride. It's amazing what you can do when you recover your healthy self. And I love writing. So yeah, I've shared my story, and a whole new world opens up once you come out of your eating disorder. It's totally amazing, and it's like coming out of a bubble and seeing that there's a world around you. So I really feel I just started to live at the age of 55. And yeah, and I'm just, yeah, delighted to be supporting the genetic initiatives, that research that you have. I totally admire your work, and with the Angie program and now with the EDGI program, just it means so much. It means so much because for people, when we are in the eating disorder, we often think it's it's our weakness, and to know that there is a genetic component that it takes away a lot of the shame and the and to know that there is a cause and there's something we can do about it is really, really comforting. Yeah.
Let's go into those topics in backwards order. So we'll since you stop with genetics, we'll start there, and then I want to go all the way back to my life started at 55. So starting with genetics, June, you have been a champion of our genetic research back in the EDGI days. I remember you posting something on your blog of you giving blood because we had to donate blood back when we did the EDGI study. And one of the questions that I have for you is, the results from the EDGI study showed that there were both metabolic and psychiatric components to anorexia. And that was new. That was probably the biggest headline that came out of the EDGI study. When you heard that, how did you incorporate that into your own sort of personal narrative about what you had gone through in your life?
Yeah, I was overwhelmed emotionally. Still makes me very emotional because I had such losses due to my eating disorder. And because there was no understanding, and my family didn't understand. And so I really, I became alienated from my parents and my sister. And so the losses, to know that if my parents, I'm talking about the 1960s here, that wasn't their fault that they didn't understand. There was just nothing there to help them understand. And of course, there was nothing for any of us, and I was in a rural area, and it was okay to break a leg, but it wasn't okay to be weak in the mind. And so it was very awkward for me growing up, and looking back, I could see my mother was a very anxious person, and my sister. Looking back, she certainly had she certainly had OCD growing up, and other problems. So there were issues in the mental health of the family, and but of course, when you don't have the knowledge or the support, you just survive the best way you can, I guess. And so, yeah, I was overwhelmed with your findings. I was so proud that day I gave blood for the Angie. I felt it was, it was so, it was like going back to when I was 11 years old. And it meant so much because it meant someone understood and was doing something, because you feel so, I was often told, you think too much, pull up your socks, and why aren't you communicating? Because I would try and explain how I was feeling, and I would be told I was silly. So, I ended up not talking. and luckily, well, I had, I did keep a diary, which became my only place to try and sort my thoughts, which would not settle. I didn't, and the thing is, when you're a kid with anorexia, you don't know what it's like not to have it. I mean, so I would look at children who could eat lunch at school, and I'm thinking, how can you eat that salad roll and that cream bun and have an ice cream? I couldn't do that because the guilt would have crippled me. And I didn't know how to be carefree like the other children. And so I tried. You try to conform, but the toll is awful, in that you feel so conflicted. Like the torment was what almost took my life in my 20s. And it's just not understanding. And that's what I love about your research, is that it helps us to understand why we are the way we are. And that's so helpful. And you know, some people say, well, you've got a label, and that's not helpful. Sorry, the cat just jumped on the table. It is helpful to have a label, because you can then do something about it. And it's about making the most of what we have. I don't focus on what I've lost, but I do focus on what I have, and making, you know, improving the life quality all the time. And because when we have an eating disorder, there are all sorts of losses. There's quality, there's physical health losses, there's relationship losses, there's study loss, you know, study opportunity losses, and employment losses, but we can get a lot of those back, and there's some we can't, and we just make the most of what we can get back, and build on what we can do. And I have found that just meeting other people with the same life experience is really, really helpful. I think, you know, when I maybe in my 30s and 40s and trying to forget it, I just wanted a life. I wanted to be like other people. I wanted to live on the outer rim of life. I didn't want to go inside. And but I found that never worked. I needed to go inside, and I needed to heal from within, and connect with my healthy self, and that made all the difference. And it takes courage to do that.
That's what I was just about to ask you, June, because I'm guessing that there are people out there who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s even, who have suffered from eating disorders for a long time, and like you, might never have gotten help. But like I tell you, you're one of my role models for it's never too late. You know, sometimes, you know, I find myself as I get older saying things like, oh, I'm too old to do that. And I need a little bracelet that says, you know, what would June do? Because, you know, I don't think you ever think it's too late for anything. And just thinking of those people out there who are trying to decide, you know, is it too late for me to get help? Do you have a message for them?
Yes, it's never too late. It doesn't matter if you're in your 80s and you're in an aged care or nursing home. It's never, ever too late. I think if you can just have even one day of peace, this is what I used to pray for. Could I please have one day of peace without the torment of my eating disorder? Then I would die happily. I used to try and battle with God. Give me one day of peace. And I know that it's never ever too late. I can't say that from my heart strongly enough. To know peace is, you know, this is, I imagine many people are like me. All I wanted was to feel at peace within myself. I just wanted just to be me, and not to have this constant tormentor of the eating disorder not letting me settle, and always yes, I just wanted peace from that voice, and I have it now, and I was 55 when I started to get, that peace. Um, I will never forget. I will never forget the day when I knew I'd got to 51% me, and it was at night time, and I was sitting on the veranda with my dog and my cat at my feet, and I was looking up at the Milky Way, which we have in the Southern Hemisphere. It was a starry night, and I just knew I had got to that 51%. I had been showing courage in preceding months in facing some really challenging family times. And it was like I got a reward. I got this extra connection. And once I got to 51%, my healing was rapid. And now I will say I'm probably 95%, and the other 5% doesn't matter because it has no voting rights. But
I love that.
So it allows me always to feel for others, and yes, I do constantly get emails and messages from women who have been suffering for, some 40 or 50 years. And I always write back, I always respond, and I always encourage them to reach out and get help because it's never too late. Yeah.
I love that image. I got goosebumps when you just talked about looking up at the sky and seeing the Milky Way, and that sort of just heaven sort of opening up, sort of like the gateway to the peace that you had been looking for and had not been able to find. That's a striking image, June. I mean, it is, because I mean, and seeing the Milky Way in the Southern Hemisphere is an experience that a lot of people will never have. But it sort of dwarfs you. At the same time, it gives you that sense of belonging and being part of the universe. So I can just imagine June sitting there with her cat and her dog having that moment that really did mark a sort of just a turning point.
It was amazing after like 44 years. Yes.
44 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the role of writing in your recovery. You already said that you were keeping a diary way back when you were 11. So were you already keeping a diary then?
Yes.
And
yes.
you have all the way through up until now, or there was a time when
I still keep a diary.
Yeah. But I mean, from 11 all the way to the current time?
Yes.
Wow. That's a lot of words, June.
Yes.
So tell me,
I have a lot of diaries, and the first little one, I can pull it out. Hang on, I'll just grab it.
Right.
Yeah, it's right here.
Oh, that's your first diary.
Yeah, it's it's got like, but the very first day, if anyone had looked at my very first day, which is very hard to see because some of the ink has faded.
Yeah.
But if you had read it,
yes.
you would have known this little girl has anorexia, because it was all about numbers.
Yeah.
And it was cricket. It was summer. We have cricket in Australia. Yes. And I had a fascination for cricket scores, but also the amounts of food that I was eating, the time I got up, how far I walked. Everything was in numbers, and there was very, very, very little food. And and these were my first 4 years.
Wow.
I graduated to bigger. I have, there's 55. I mean, there's a lot of them now. But they became my my survival tool. As I got a little older, the writing became smaller, and I would use the diary to try and to cope, to like you could see I got writing all over the place. The pages weren't big enough, and and so I'd write smaller and smaller to get more in. But I realize now that the diary also became entwined in the eating disorder. I would use the diary to try and get some sense of control in, like, I would map out, I'm going to have this food, you know, the 3 meals. I'd write it down, but I would never get more than one day, and I would fail. And then I would have to start again, and I'd write up the top of the page, day 1. I was the world champion in having day 1. Day one was the new day. I was going to be normal and have 3 meals, but I couldn't do it. And then the self-loathing would come in, and yeah, this went on for many years. And I married young at 20. I met my husband-to-be when I was 16, and I'm very fortunate that he came from a family of good sound, being on a farm, but he was from very good stock. He was stable and safe and secure, and that was one life-saving thing that happened in my life. So we married young, and I had 4 children by the time I was 25. And when I was going through my recovery, though, I had a lot of guilt, and I would see my church minister and my psychiatrist in equal amounts, and they were both very good to me. This was in my 30s when I actually did meet a psychiatrist who gave a correct diagnosis. I had chronic anxiety, chronic depression, and chronic eating disorder. And but in my 20s, when I was having my children, the 9 months that you have with a pregnancy, I used that in my diaries as I was going to get myself okay. By the time I had my baby, I had a time limit. And that's why I had 4 in 4 years, because, well, I had the first baby, and then I lasted a couple of days after he was born, eating 3 meals.
Right.
And then, you know, breastfeeding and then the eating disorder took over again. And then I would get depressed, and then I would think, well, I'll have another. I had to work through this. This was really bad. I'll have another baby, and I will get it right this time. Right. I will eat carefully. I will show that I can do this. This went on, and by the time I got to the 4th baby, my body was really worn out, and I was having also. I almost lost my 4th baby, and I was having a lot of shocks, but nobody at the hospital, of course, suspected or asked me about having an eating disorder. My iron levels were awful. I had to have large injections. They thought that the fetus was being starved. I had to take these huge containers of urine in for them to test the iron levels. Nobody asked me a question about.
Didn't even suspect.
No. And then but I knew also, because I was working, writing was my thing, and I was a journalist, and my husband was a farmer, and I had the income that put food on the table. So I knew I couldn't have more than 4 babies and still work.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to work full time. There was no opportunity to work part time.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and my sister's still telling me I'm thinking too much. So the more I kept doing more and more to try and keep my busy mind away from the eating disorder, it was so difficult. And so anyway, it was really difficult. I knew I couldn't have any more children, so I said to my gynecologist that I'm going to have my tubal ligation, because and so that really put pressure on with the 4th pregnancy.
Right.
I had made up my mind this was do or die. Like, I had to get it right this time.
Right.
I had to be able to eat my 3 meals every day. And I said, I've got to have the operation before I go home. And he said, well, we don't normally do that. But I had to have that done, because I knew if I went home with the baby and had to go back to have the tubal ligation, I knew I would want another baby. Like that, I knew
Right.
that, I had to be really firm about this.
Like
So
an external control almost.
I was trying to solve my problem.
Right.
But
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing. You came up with so many potential ways to try to fix this.
yeah.
Nobody on the outside recognized it, and there was no
So
help.
I had the tubal ligation, and
Yeah.
at the age of 20, 25, and went home, and of course rapidly descended into the darkest of depressions. And then, I was suicidal at 27, 28. And and then I was 32 when I finally met a psychiatrist who diagnosed me. And
Okay.
that's when my recovery started. And he was patient, thank goodness. And my children, they gave me the strength to keep going. They gave me, I wanted to be okay for my children. So they were my inspiration not to give up. And unfortunately, my eating disorder also took my marriage. And my children were aged 8 to 12 when my eating disorder convinced me that my husband was the reason why I was not recovering.
Mm.
And I had to give him up. And that was really, of course, made things worse, because he was actually he was a good thing. He
Right.
was a rock.
Yeah.
He was always there for me. But the eating disorder loves to isolate and conquer, and it was doing a good job in doing that with me.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to say that today, like, my husband always stayed a rock for me. And as the children grew up, they became supports. And I missed out on so much, because my daughter was 8 and I knew she was better with her dad, because this is the thing, Cindy, your research is so important, because when my daughter, like, this is the early 80s now, and my daughter, she was born in 76. Mm-hmm. So my daughter, I was so afraid. I wasn't so worried about my boys. I didn't, the genetics I didn't know anything about, but I had an awful feeling I didn't want my daughter to catch this illness. Mm-hmm. And so I more or less had this huge sacrifice of allowing her to grow up with her dad in her dad's house, because I was in my 30s by now and I was nowhere near recovered. And I just felt that she would be safer with her dad. So I had this hole in my heart where she was, and it still brings tears to my eyes because I really loved her so much, and I loved them all, but I was so afraid that my daughter might have my illness. As it turned out, she became an elite rower, and at university she did have suffered disordered eating. But you know what? One day she said to me, "Mom, I'm going to stop rowing." And I couldn't believe it because I knew she loved it. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I feel I'm turning into a fruitcake." And I knew then she was going to be okay, because she was getting the voice. Because she was in lightweight rowing. She wasn't really tall, but so she had to be a certain weight to row at national level. And she recognized that some of the decisions she was making were not of her own sound mind. And she had enough, I guess, of her dad's good genes to recognize this, and she withdrew from rowing for some months. She did go back to it, but she only went back to it when she felt she was fully herself again. And I've never forgotten that, because at that point I would have developed the eating disorder for sure. Like, I did not have enough sound genes. She knew she had enough stronger, healthy self to counteract, to recognize, and she was also a little like able to talk to a dietitian, and also to get the proper help. And now,
sorry to interrupt. I think that takes so much courage. You know, we have seen a couple athletes, in the last couple of years, pull back from their sport for the goodness of their health. And a lot of people don't understand. But like you said, that is such a sign of health. That's a sign that you have the ability to actually monitor when your own thoughts are being hijacked like that, and that kept her probably from going down that path of torment that you were talking about. So I just find that so, I mean, you just have to support people when they make decisions that are so hard like that, when rowing is their life, or when figure skating is their life, or whatever. What an amazing story.
And she's in her 40s now, and she's a mom of 3, and she still loves to keep fit. She still goes on 10K runs and so on, and she runs with her children. And of course, now I've got granddaughters who are, my eldest granddaughter will be 11 this Christmas, which was, so I'm it's they but I just would like there, for people who've felt estranged from their families, I just want to say, don't give up. That families are so important, and we know now we have family-based therapy. We have so many, and there's more support for families, for parents, because this, we know, is a family illness. It's not just a one-person illness. It's extremely hard to get to recover your healthy self on your own without family support, and but it can be done. And also, if you are not fortunate enough to have family support, then you can also control that to a little bit by choosing your own family. Like, I didn't share my story for 44 years, and it was only with Claire Middleton, who started the Butterfly Foundation in Australia. When I was 55 and I had that moment with the Milky Way, I decided the time was right to write my memoir. And the reason for that was I wanted my children to know my story. I had been labeled the problem in the family, and I'd never forgotten when one of my boys, he was 16, and he'd come home from a holiday with his grandparents and told me that they'd said, "Mum, you're the problem in the family." And I burst into tears, and I've never forgotten that because it made me feel like I had this label, and I wanted to show my children that this is my story so they could understand me and make up their own minds. And so that's what I did. But when I spoke with Claire, she was one of the first people I reached out to after, it was a bit like coming out of a cocoon. I had all this inside me for all these years, and I was sharing it for the first time. And she encouraged me to write my story, and so I'm ever grateful to Claire. And as a result of that, a whole new world opened up. So by letting the inside out, it's enabled me to have a real life. And I had no idea that this, I call it a magic carpet, right?
Yeah.
And in my 60s, I've done a PhD. I couldn't do a PhD in my 20s.
Can you say that again? Please say again. In my 60s, I did a PhD. People need to hear that. Say it one more time. One more time. Come on.
Yes, well, I was actually encouraged to do a PhD in my 60s, and I did it in 3 years. It's because but I was, and I was, it was something I dreamt about doing, but never thought possible. And the reason, it was my life experience that enabled me to do the PhD. I was able to do my PhD in philosophy, like in creative writing. It was the diary. It was actually taking the eating disorder and turning it into something good, taking the eating disorder, the skills that I'd put into the eating disorder and putting them into something good. Yes. And showing the eating disorder that I was really getting back at it now.
I love that so much. That is like my message. So much energy goes into maintaining the eating disorder. And part of recovery, and you've just illustrated this so beautifully, is figuring out how to repackage all that energy and put it toward good. And, as you say and others say, sock it to the eating disorder. It's like, it's just your story just, it's so long, and all of those years of not having help. But at the same time, when you tell your story, you just ooze hope. And, I just think that's what I want people to see. It's almost like, like rays of sunshine coming off of you, basically saying, this is possible. You can do this. Recovery at any age can happen. And it just, every time I hear your story, and I knew you before you were Dr. Alexander. And every time I hear your story, it just warms my heart and gives me so much hope for all the people out there who really don't understand that you can recover at any age.
Yes.
It's amazing. An amazing story.
You can.
What's your Diary Healer website? I want to make sure people know. Is it just www?
thediaryhealer.com.
Thediaryhealer.com. I encourage everyone to go up there and take a look at it. And, June really shows us how much writing can be your friend. It can liberate you. It can, take what, as she said, what was inside and get it out. It just, I mean, and June, sharing all those early diaries with us, that was just a gift. That was amazing to see that little pile of, from so many years ago. And of course, I'm going to let people know that if you're in Australia, if you want to know more about the Eating Disorders Genetics Initiative there, the website for that is edgi.org.au. And if you're interested in EDGI in the United States, it is edgi.org. And you can follow us on social media at EDGI Study. And of course, the Australians and the New Zealanders have all of their EDGI social media as well. And I just wanted to stick that in there, June, but one of the things I wanted to ask you before we stop is these eating disorders are so misunderstood. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you really want people to hear to correct some of the misunderstandings that people have?
Well, my first message to people who are experiencing symptoms right now is I just encourage you to be really brave and to reach out first to your GP, your local doctor, and tell them. Sometimes we have to be really brave and tell them. I've had where you can't speak for yourself, write it down and hand the piece of paper over. Sometimes our eating disorder doesn't let us speak, but we can write. And that's what I found very helpful. And for families who have someone in the family with eating disorder symptoms, I also encourage you not to ever give up on them. And I say the same to clinicians and or everyone working in the health professions. Never ever give up on someone with an eating disorder. It's an incredibly tough illness. It's like living with someone else in your brain, and you have to try and overcome it. And it's not like you can put your hands up and manipulate it and straighten it out. You have to do it by the power of thought alone. And the way to do that is to have a lot of nourishment for the brain. I have great faith in the brain, and I love you, Cindy. I love Janet Treasure and Daniel LaGrange, and I love I love these wonderful researchers. We need to support our researchers because they are making my life is so good today because of the work you do. And I just it's feeling like, and others say this to me, contributing as a participant to the research you're doing. I know in Australia we needed to get 3,500, I think, 3,700. I know we already have over 2,500. We will meet our quota. And
I'm sure with you working on it, June, I'm sure Australia's going
to. It makes you feel like your life counts, and that's really important to know that.
Part of the team, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are a team. I can't do my research without you. And, you all are researchers right alongside us. So it's a community, it's a team, and we're all working together toward the same goal. So.
Yeah, so I just want to say a big thank you. And there's always hope, and there's, we never give up. And we're here for each other.
Thank you so much, June. That is a beautiful place for us to stop. Thank you so much for joining us on EDGI Talk today. And I can't wait to see you in person and give you a big hug.
Yes.
Take care.
Loads of love. Yeah. Bye, Cindy.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.